we were in two minds at the time, and it turned out we were a bit too optimistic. George obviously came out, the circuit was still too wet for dry tyres.
Hello and welcome to this Akkodis Race Debrief. My name's Jodi, and joining us today we have team representative Bradley Lord, here to answer your questions from the British Grand Prix. Bradley, it's been a difficult home race, needless to say. We've had a few of the fans writing in, wanting to know our understanding behind George's race start. Could you talk us through that?
Yeah, we're sitting here recording this on Monday after the Grand Prix, and I must say it's a pretty big contrast to 12 months ago when we were celebrating a victory. Obviously, we went to the grid yesterday. It was wet, and we could see also that it was going to stay dry probably for about 20-25 minutes. So we knew there was a window where the circuit might dry out. The sun came out as well, and you could start to see a dry line emerging, but we knew there was a big weather front coming in behind. So the call was, do you try and maximize that dry window and hope that you can make the most of dry tyre performance and make up a pit stop gap, or sort of play it a little bit safer and a bit more conservative, stay out there on the inter and try and make that last into the next rain shower? As we were on the formation lap, George said, I think we should go for it. We followed that call and agreed with that call and decided to do it and rolled the dice. We weren't the only cars. I think about 5 different cars came in and took dry tyres. Leclerc did so from right behind us as well. So at that point, as the lights went out at the end of the pit lane, it looked like a marginal call, but a roll of the dice that might work out. And then, unfortunately, what followed were VSC periods and other things that meant any dry tyre advantage that might have been there. And to be honest, in hindsight, it turns out that wasn't there for a number of laps, was squandered because we were all running at reduced speed, costing temperature in the tyres, and it meant we couldn't really take advantage of that early bold call.
What if we could have taken advantage of it though? If you could just humour me, how could that have played out differently had we have had that dry weather?
Had we not had the VSCs and then also the safety car and other things that took place, there was the opportunity obviously to have a decent advantage on a drying track and therefore to catch back up to the cars in front who were running on intermediate tyres. Now, as always in these wet dry or dry wet races, it's not usually the first decision that is critical, it's normally the final one. And so we actually took the inter at a good point. George had made decent progress from the back of the field through to the points, and even then it looked like maybe P3, P4 could be on. We were in and around Lewis's Ferrari and racing there. Got stuck behind Gasly. George wasn't able to find a way past because that intermediate tyre was dropping, and that was the point where we had to make the call on, okay, when do we go back to the dry tyre? Again, we chose to be aggressive. I think there was a radio message, George sort of saying, let's be aggressive. His engineer Marcus saying, yes, but not suicidal. We want to be on the right side of aggressive. We took that call, and again, in hindsight, and indeed, we were in two minds at the time, and it turned out we were a bit too optimistic. George obviously came out, the circuit was still too wet for dry tyres. Alonso was in the process of finding out the same thing halfway around his own out lap. George had the spin at Beckett's, that cost him position, and then from there really it was very difficult to build an overtaking delta on similar age tyres. We were offset on tyre compound, we had some apprehension about taking the medium, so I'd gone for the hard tyre. That in hindsight was probably also not the right call, and it meant that we in the end were left fighting pretty hard to hold on to 10th place rather than potentially in much better points paying positions.
And looking at our options of tyres and Kimi's race start, we only kept him on the inters just for a few laps. So what was our reasoning behind that?
Yeah, we decided to mirror what we'd done with George and to take the dry tyre. The reasoning being, if you think that's the right call to have made, then you want both cars on the right strategy, what you think is the right one rather than the wrong one. As it turned out, that was also a mistake. We should really have split our chances, left Kimi out there, and we could have then seen what he could have achieved. So we saw Hulkenberg, for example, he started P19. He made, I think, a single pit stop in the race from intermediate to dry and ended up finishing P3. So yeah, that call then put Kimi ahead of George on the road, but nonetheless, again, at the back of the pack and circulating between those who'd stayed on inters and those who'd gone to dry tyres, and really didn't serve us well.
And then unfortunately we saw Kimi get a DNF. So what was the extent of that damage for Kimi, and how's he feeling after the weekend?
Yeah, we spent quite a long time actually trying to figure out what was the extent of that damage. After it had happened, we did pit Kimi in order to change tyres, and it became clear then there was some pretty major damage to the diffuser. So Hadjar had run into the back of him at turn 9, that's Copse corner, so even in the wet, a pretty high speed corner, he'd run into him there, taken off a big chunk of the diffuser tunnel on the right hand side, so the sidewall that sort of forms the side of the diffuser, and there was a big cut through the left hand side as well. So Ultimately, there's no carryover damage. That isn't something that goes into the next races, but it left Kimi with a big downforce deficit at the rear of the car, made it very hard to drive, and ultimately it was clear that he'd lost so much performance he wasn't going to make up any ground, so he took the decision to retire. After the race, understandably, he was pretty downcast. I mean, that's 2 retirements in 3 in the last 4 races for him, so it's been a tough run, and as much as anything, I think really Kimi wanted to understand what the underlying balance limitation was for him this weekend. He was struggling for confidence in the high speed, and that's something we'll be going through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure there's nothing in the car, its setup, its configuration that has left him not feeling fully confident to attack those high-speed corners. Obviously, that's not just important in Silverstone, but coming up to Spa, another circuit with a lot of long high-speed corners, we want to make sure that we're giving him the very best equipment to show the best of his talent that we know is there.
And as you go through that data now, looking ahead, what are our expectations going into the last 2 races before the summer break?
Been a pretty bruising double header, to be honest, with Austria and then Silverstone as well. We've just got 1 5th place finish to show for our efforts and 1 10th place finish, so well below our expectations. So first and foremost, it is to put ourselves on a much better footing and demonstrate the full performance potential of the car. And after that, we've got updates coming. We've got a number of things to understand about the weekend in Silverstone, notably the balance limitation for Kimi and whether the drivers are able to really commit to those high-speed corners as much as they want to with how we're running the car at the moment. So we need to dig through that, make some decisions on what the spec of the car will be for Spa, and then also we've got some performance updates coming in both Spa and Hungary, so opportunities to make step forwards there. Likewise, we've got a sprint weekend in Spa, so just 1 practice session and then we've got to be right on it and straight into qualifying. So it's going to be a challenge, but we're hopeful of being able to give a much better showing than we did either in Silverstone or in Austria last week.
Bradley, it may have not gone our way on track, but off track there were some beautiful sights to be seen. We had the Concept AMG GT XX. Can you tell us a little bit more about that car?
Yeah, we had a few questions, if I'm honest, in Silverstone, because people saw orange stars on the car, they saw orange detailing, different logos, an orange safety car as well, and maybe were wondering quite what was the link between Mercedes and the orange. They wondered if it was a tribute to our partner team McLaren or something else, but it wasn't. It was, as you say, marking the AMG GT XX and the launch of that concept. So it's a really exciting technology program from Mercedes-AMG that showcases the future of electric performance. It's a concept that I think it's over 1,000 kilowatts of electric power, so that's 1,300 horsepower, more than an F1 car. So it's a really exciting technology platform. That was launched on the Wednesday before the Austrian Grand Prix, and then in Silverstone we did a bit of a takeover to showcase not just that future concept and bring it to life, but apply it to the present of the team and the safety car as well, and then also show some of its past inspiration. So past inspiration for the GTXX with the C111 concept that now lives in the museum but is still a real eye turner, and George certainly enjoyed driving that in one morning. But then also looking back to some of the history of Mercedes-Benz in motorsport too. So this year marked the 70th anniversary of Sir Stirling Moss's victory in the British Grand Prix in 1955, and George even took one of the old W196s up to Aintree, up to the racecourse in Liverpool, to give it a drive round and to pay tribute to that moment as well. So it was a real weekend of past, present and future, and that was a nice thing to do, even if ultimately, sadly, the results didn't reflect the efforts that had gone into making all of that so special.
We saw Hulkenberg get his very first podium in F1. Can you tell us more about how the team helped him celebrate that moment?
Yeah, that was undoubtedly the feel-good story, wasn't it? That after, I think, over 230 Grand Prix that Nico finally got that podium finish. Obviously, he's been part of the Mercedes motorsport family in the past, driving for Force India. And I remember very vividly, actually, when we were celebrating 125 years of Mercedes motorsport, Nico driving the W25, so the original 1934 Mercedes race car, and the mechanics from the classic department being incredibly impressed at his ability in that car and how well he adapted to it, and just his pure driving talent to make it lap Hockenheim quite as expertly and quickly as it did, and all while sort of you can see the road through the sort of planks that form the bottom of the car as well. So that's a really strong memory. And then at the end of the race, we often, when teams score unexpected results or firsts, we'll send down a bottle or two of champagne so that they can celebrate with something, just to say well done really from another member of the motorsport community. So we were able to do that, and I think it turned out they didn't actually have any champagne down at Sauber, so it came as a welcome surprise and something I'm sure they made really good use of. So yeah, a nice example of the fact that we're fierce rivals on track, but it is still a community in the paddock, and we're always pleased to see people achieve milestones and achieve firsts in their career as well.